Judge mocks old woman in court, instantly regrets it when she speaks. Martha Hayes stood in the courtroom, gripping the edge of the plaintiff's table. Her weathered hands trembled slightly, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. She was no lawyer, no trained litigator, just an elderly woman fighting for the only home she'd ever known. Across the room, high-powered corporate attorney Victor Langley barely glanced at her, adjusting his expensive cufflinks with an air of smug confidence. Judge Raymond Fulton exhaled sharply, barely containing his amusement as he flipped through the case file. "Mrs. Hayes, you're representing yourself?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. Martha met his gaze. "Yes, Your Honor." A low chuckle rippled through the courtroom. Langley smirked, leaning toward his assistant. "This will be over in 10 minutes. Martha heard him. She was meant to. But she kept her face still, her resolve unshaken. She had been underestimated before, dismissed as fragile and incapable. She had spent her entire life proving people wrong, and today would be no different. Judge Fulton sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Very well. Let's proceed. Mr. Langley, your opening statement." Langley rose with practiced ease, buttoning his jacket. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a simple case. My client lawfully acquired the property through standard foreclosure proceedings. Mrs. Hayes may have personal grievances, but emotions don't override contracts, deadlines, and obligations. The law is clear. The numbers don't lie." He glanced at Martha dismissively before taking his seat. Martha stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. "Mr. Langley is right about one thing," she began. "The law is clear. The question is whether his client actually followed it." Langley's smirk faltered slightly. "For the last 6 months, I have studied every statute, every case, every loophole that banks and corporations use to strip homes from families. And in my research, I found something. Something that changes everything." Judge Fulton arched an eyebrow. "And what exactly did you find, Mrs. Hayes?" Martha pulled 2 documents from her folder. "Before we proceed, Your Honor, I formally request full discovery. Because I have reason to believe that the foreclosure on my home was based on fraudulent documents." The word fraud landed like a thunderclap. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Even Judge Fulton, who had seemed ready to dismiss her, leaned forward with sudden interest. Langley scoffed, shaking his head. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Baseless accusations from a woman desperate to keep her home." Martha ignored him and stepped toward the bench. "These are 2 copies of the original mortgage agreement. One from the initial filing and one from a later modification. Look at the signatures." Fulton took the papers, scanning them. His brow furrowed. Martha continued. "I know my father's signature. And that second one? That's not his. That document was signed the day after my father was hospitalized for a stroke. He was physically incapable of holding a pen, let alone signing legal paperwork." The gallery gasped. Even Langley's assistant shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Langley's jaw clenched. Judge Fulton turned to Langley. "Mr. Langley, does your client have the original signed documents?" Langley hesitated. It was slight, but noticeable. We would need time to retrieve them." Martha smiled. "That's fine. I'll wait." The silence in the courtroom shifted. It was no longer just curiosity. It was doubt. Judge Fulton tapped his gavel. "Mr. Langley, given the nature of these allegations, I am granting full discovery. Your firm will provide all original documentation related to this case within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal consequences." Langley visibly paled. "Your Honor, I'm not finished." Fulton's tone was razor-sharp. He turned to Martha. Mrs. Hayes, if your claims hold, we may be dealing with more than an unlawful foreclosure. We could be looking at large-scale fraud, perjury, and criminal charges. Martha nodded. I understand, Your Honor. And I intend to prove it. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Then, suddenly, the heavy courtroom doors creaked open. A man stepped inside. His cane tapped against the marble floor in slow, deliberate movements. Gasps filled the air as heads turned. Even Langley stiffened in his seat. Martha turned, her breath catching. Dad? Her father, frail but determined, walked toward her. His eyes locked onto Langley. The color drained from the attorney's face. Judge Fulton peered over his glasses. And who might you be, sir? The old man lifted his chin, voice unwavering. Joseph Hayes, Your Honor. The man whose signature was forged. The courtroom erupted. Judge Fulton banged his gavel. Order. Order in the court. The room quieted, but the tension remained thick. Martha turned to the judge, her voice calm but lethal. Your Honor, I think we just found our star witness. Judge Fulton studied Joseph Hayes for a long moment before leaning forward, his expression unreadable. But when he spoke, his tone carried the weight of justice. Mr. Langley, he said, dangerously quiet. Do you wish to amend your statement? Langley opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Very well, Judge Fulton said. In light of this testimony and the gravity of these allegations, I am ordering an immediate evidentiary hearing. Mr. Hayes's sworn affidavit will be recorded today. And if his claims hold, he fixed Langley with an icy stare, I will personally refer this case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. A stunned hush settled over the courtroom. Martha turned to her father, reaching for his hand. He gave her a small, knowing nod. You've got this. The gavel slammed down once more. But this time, it didn't just signal order. It signaled the beginning of the end for Langley and the corporation that had tried to take everything from her. And Martha Hayes would make sure of it.